Hi. There are other ways to mount things. Don't don't do this to me on a Tuesday, Moss. It is a random Tuesday, and you're making me think mounting. Anyway, hi, welcome, welcome everybody. It is Tuesday. It is late. I'm so sorry that I started the reading late. It's a Tuesday, in it. Um, and I went to a conference today, and the conference was on apartheid as a crime against humanity. You know, just light stuff, everyday light stuff, because we absolutely do not live under fascism. Um, and I was speaking to a lot of people about not just apartheid as a crime against humanity, but we were talking about gender justice within an anti-apartheid framework, and what apartheid looks like, and the definition of apartheid, and how it differs from statute to statute under the UN. The petition that is hopefully going forward to consider apartheid as a crime against humanity and a war crime under the Geneva Suggestions, more like it. So yeah, that's what we were talking about, and then I brought up things like disability and how invisible disabilities and mental disabilities are. We sent a letter exactly, and how we approach access to those kinds of care in a place where, like Palestine, where they don't have access to something as simple as anesthetic. And one of the talks, the woman mentioned that in order for somebody from the West Bank or Gaza to get chemotherapy, there is only one Palestinian hospital that they can get chemotherapy. They have to get a permit. Hi, Smarty. They have to get a permit to go from Gaza or the West Bank into East Jerusalem to get chemotherapy. They will be granted the permit to go to East Jerusalem for the first round of chemotherapy. Just enough to be dangerous, and not enough for the second, third, or fourth round of chemo. They will not get the permits for following treatments. Hey, it is willful. They will get their permits for their first round of chemotherapy, but they will be denied all of the other permits for chemotherapy afterwards. And that is what Palestinian people go through. It is a purposeful targeting, intentional targeting of racialized bodies of the global majority. And we cannot ignore that form of apartheid. The fact that a permit is required to get treatment. And the fucked up thing is, it's not the first time we've seen it. Exactly. We've seen it in forced sterilization. We've seen it in the sterilization and the under-therapeutic treatment of indigenous people on Turtle Island. We've seen it in apartheid South Africa. When people say, especially when South Africans tell me, oh, that's so fucked. This is apartheid. This is the essence of apartheid. This is what people have lived under for decades, if not centuries. And not only is it heartbreaking, it's we know who is thought of as human and who isn't. Yep. it is documented that indigenous women throughout, especially women, but indigenous people throughout Turtle Island were getting subtherapeutic doses of their medications. Just enough to have the side effects, but not enough to treat the issue. It's all documented. In the 1940s, the British, one of the British government watchdogs released a report on unsealed documents that pretty much laid out what would be considered genocide and crimes against humanity against the colonized peoples of Africa. It was 1942, I think it was. That report was not released. It wasn't released then. It was only released like in the 90s or the early 2000s. Reason being that the world would have seen that what Britain was doing to the colonized people of Africa was exactly what they were fighting the Nazis for. So yeah, it's a fun world we live in, huh? Anyway, on to some lighter stuff. We go on to race and class in chapter 6 of Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. We are on page 189 if you want to follow along. And yes, this is chapter 6, Race and Class. So let's begin. In the time that I've spent writing and publicly speaking about race, I've become familiar with one particular question. What about class? And this is something I said today as well. You cannot extricate gender, race, and class from each other because they are all interlocking systems of oppression. It's a question that follows me everywhere I go. An implication that it's class, not race, that is the true battle to be fought in Britain, and that we have to choose between one or the other. I totally reject this assumption, but I'm going to try and answer the question. What about class? 189, yes. And how does it relate to race, if it does at all? I'm so sorry. There's a frog in my throat. This frog has been there all day. And the frog's name is Ryan. Nice. Go get medicated. And how does it relate to race? If it does at all. In Britain, class is integral to how we understand our own position in society. Since the Victorian times, we have confined ourselves to one of three categories: working, middle, or upper class. We've understood class in a Marxist fashion, using a person's relationship to the means of production as a defining factor. And this is a fairly simple way of doing it. And Ryan is trying to oppress my voice, yes. Of course it would be Ryan. Oh. A white frog. To use a Marxist lens is easier than most, because it just shows the intentional inequality between the proletariat and the owning class. The saying goes that if you're paid by the hour and you rent your home, then you're working class. And if you're paid monthly and you own your home, you're middle class. But we no longer have a country full of factories, mines, and mills, with rigid structures of workers and bosses. I grew up in a generation defined by watching people older than me benefit from seemingly endless credit, so the demarcation between rich and poor was hard to spot. By the time I was 12, then Prime Minister Tony Blair announced that He wanted to see 50% of young adults in higher education by the year 2010. God, this was so long ago. Going to university was no longer a clear indication of class. In my generation, your first job was likely to be on a shop floor, in catering, or call center. The language of blue-collar and white-collar workers never really resonated. Post-2008 recession, these categories have become even more blurred as job security for most became a dream rather than a reality. And it's getting worse. I know. Like, my niece, who was born the day after my 16th birthday, turned 26. And I was like, when the fuck did that happen? How? What? We are living in a society. When did I time travel here? We're living in a reality where job security is unattainable. So the dream is actually like not even in sight. Because we are a nation that loves to think of itself as an underdog, it wasn't surprising that in 2016, British Social Attitudes Survey found that 60% of the British public identifies as working class. The most interesting part of the survey was that 47% of those who considered themselves working class were actually in managerial and professional jobs, hardly working class at all. In its analysis of the numbers, the survey called this identification the working class of the mind. Although there was no breakdown of survey respondents by racial demographics, those who identified as working class but were in middle-class jobs were more likely to have anti-immigrant policies. That's interesting. When people ask me what about class when I talk about race, I can't help but wonder if they're not really talking about money instead of a particular mindset. One of the most successful and vigorous studies on class in recent years was the Great British Class Survey commissioned by the BBC. Around 160,000 people took part, and the results published in 2013 revealed that there were not just 3 classes but 7. The elite are the wealthiest in the country, scoring highest economically, socially and culturally. The established middle class are the next. They love culture, followed by technical middle class who have money but are not social, but high on socializing and culture. They're coming from working class backgrounds and are less likely to have gone to university. The traditional working class are, on average, the oldest group, emergent service workers, lagging behind in terms of financial security. Last, there's the precariat, the most deprived group. Yes, a colonizer frog in my throat. Unlike many other class surveys, the BBC's collected information on the race of participants. You find most people of colour in the emergent service workers group, making up 20% of it. We're also over twice as likely to be found in the emergent services workers group than traditional working class group. You're going to bed. Okay, fine, I'll make my own tea. Love you. You're handsome. And materially, we are actually poorer. I say we because according to the calculator, I'm an emergent service worker along with 19% of the population, tending to be young, living in urban areas, and a lot of us not being white. We have high cultural and social capital, but barely any economic capital. Our income averages at around £21,000 a year. That's higher than traditional working class, who tend to be living in post-industrial areas of England. They are much more likely to own their own home and have more money in savings than my group. The Great British Class Survey report concluded that emergent service workers, arts and humanities graduates doing bar work or working in call centres, are the children of traditional working class people. My guess is that they're also the children of immigrants. Tell you a bit of an experience about London. One of the first things I noticed is, of all the people, they call them street urchins, which is so dehumanizing. But the people who are considered street urchins, I heard that term so many times. Most are not of color. They're not people of color. Or as I'd like to call, I'll say they're people of no color. This information asks their own version of ugly laws being visibly. Yup. I lived in London for almost a decade, and the unhoused were mostly white people. Yeah. Especially in the areas. So I stayed in Shoreditch. And I know that that's like one of the more expensive areas. But I got a really great deal on a hostel there. Yeah, I like that. I really like Shoreditch. Also, Dishoom was right around the corner from me, so I was happy. Shoreditch is one of those places where there's a bar or a club or like a really fancy restaurant, like pretty much in every corner. It is party central, or it was when I was there. And really easy access to the other entertainment districts of London. Staying in between four really central, like not central, but like major train stations. Yes, it is the hipster part of London. I saw the band Everything Everything at Rough Trade Records. They played there. Yeah, I saw a good couple of bands there. Really nice. Lots of graffiti. I saw some of Banksy's older works. And yeah, it was white people all over, just begging. And I asked one of the people who worked at the hostel, like, how come, like, there's so many social safety nets in the UK, especially for white people, easier for white people to access, rather. How come these people are on the street? And I know it's not how they're supposed to be, you know. One of the things that was said to me at that table when we were having dinner at the hostel was white people think it's beneath them to access anything from the state because that's for immigrants. But then they have a problem when immigrants access social safety nets. Yeah. It is. And that response to me was just like, oh. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's so many social programs for disabled people that are so much easier for white people to access. Yes, but then they have a problem when immigrants access those programs, even though they say no, it's beneath them to access it because it's for immigrants, which is racist in itself, and xenophobic. Yes, so that they can undo those programs and take them away. And which is wild to me, Anachronista. It's so wild to me because one of the reasons for instituting capitalism in the colonies was so that there could be socialism in the metropole. I'm sorry, babe. Anyway, this information suggests that it's not as simple as binary or choosing between race and class when thinking about structural inequality. Not only does a three-tiered class hierarchy no longer really exist, but it looks like existing race inequalities are compounded rather than erased by class inequality. In the wake of the 2015 summer budget, analysis from race equality think tank Runnymede Trust found that 4 million black and minority ethnic people would be worse off as a result of it, that BME people were overrepresented in areas hit by the budget, and that race inequality will worsen over time because of it. The reality is, if you're not born white in this country, you probably haven't been born into wealth. Research from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation shows that black and minority ethnic people are much more likely to live in income poverty than their white counterparts. At the time of the research, the foundation found that just 20% of white Brits are living in income poverty, a drastic comparison to 30% of black Caribbeans, 45% of black Africans, 55% of Pakistanis, and 65% of Bangladeshis. The report also found that a disturbing 50% of black and minority ethnic children were living in poverty. But that Joseph Rowntree report was published in 2007. Looking at census data provides a more long-term analysis of race and poverty. Published in 2014, analysis from the 2011 census focused on race and the labor market and found that black men aged between 16 and 64 have the highest unemployment rates in the country, and that black women are more likely to be unemployed than white women. When it comes to the type of work that people in Britain are doing, the evidence again correlates along race lines. Pakistani, black African, and Bangladeshi men are the most likely to work in low-skilled and low-paid jobs. According to the census, low-skilled jobs include admin, care work, sales, and customer service, as well as operating machinery. Asian people are concentrated in sectors like accommodation, food, and retail, whereas BME women are concentrated in health and social work, meaning that when these public services face government cutbacks, black women feel it especially hard. Pakistani and Indian men can be found in wholesale, retail, and mechanics. These are not exactly middle-class jobs. These are objective figures. They suggest that many consider their class to be about preferred culture and politics rather than relationships to assets and wealth. Unlike race and racism, it's generally accepted in Britain that your class can be either positively or negatively affecting your lot in life. But race is rarely brought into the analysis. Instead, when we think about inequality, we are only encouraged to think of race and class as distinct and separate. They're not. None of this is to say that white people aren't living in poverty in Britain. Rather, it's to point out that the working class people in this country are not all white. In the face of an assumption around class that seems to be hung up solely on the purity of British racial exclusivity, we should ask ourselves who exactly makes up the working class. The wealthiest greed is never sated. Absolutely. Channel 4 made a TV show called Benefit Street, which was all about adding stigma to claimants. Claimants all being lazy with flat screen TVs or just keep having kids to get more money. There was this white guy at the meeting last night who was basically like, we don't um, we don't have proper frameworks from which to like move forward with these intersections in mind. I'm like, no, 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 you do. You're just not reading the kind of work that is being produced on it because they're written by mostly black women. And he looked at me incredulously and he's like, I find like Angela Davis's writing very lazy. And somebody pointed out that was the fourth time during that meeting that he referred to anything that came off a black person as lazy. So my response to him was, do you just think black people are lazy because they don't work for free anymore? He walked away. Welfare queen rhetoric is perpetuated even by the social workers who grant the very same benefits. Yep. Absolutely. Do it. The working class is mostly black and brown because of generational poverty. Just like there is generational wealth, there is generational poverty. A lot of my white friends, majority of my white friends here, when their parents pass, they will be inheriting houses. Sorry? Oh, when their parents pass, they'll be inheriting houses. They will have investments. Like, they'll be going into wealth. Black and brown people in South Africa, when our parents' generation passes, we inherit their debt. That is generational poverty. And still, black and brown women work more hours than white men across the world. Never has the conversation about class and inequality felt more urgent than in recent discussions about London's housing crisis, on the lack of available social housing, on barely regulated private rental sectors, and the increasingly futile pursuit of home ownership. In the capital, the invasion of luxury flats built for people on extraordinarily high incomes appeared to start in the east and quickly began to spread north. I'll get half a house and I'll lose my disability benefits. Whew. Yes. When I say that there is no disability equality, people wonder what I mean. Like, look at people who are receiving disability grants and tell me that this is fair. That you can't inherit a house, like you can't receive a gift from a really rich friend that goes 1 cent over what you get. I can't get disability because my husband is high earning. And if you marry somebody who is not on disability, if you marry somebody who has an earning capacity higher than the disability that you get, you lose your disability entirely. In the US, the UK, Australia, all over Europe. Can't live with a partner because then the state sees me. It's exactly. So it's not even marriage equality. There is no marriage equality. construction was alarmingly swift. I spent half of my childhood in Tottenham, northeast London. When I go back to visit friends and family, I see the area changing. Walking down from one Tottenham street on an autumn evening, I noticed what was once an area of demolition had sprung up into a skeletal scaffolding. The grounds were surrounded with boarding, and the boarding was plastered with aspirational images. The words on the boarding were equal parts sinister as they were inviting. The reading really depended on who caught a glimpse of it at the time. Enjoy a more urban side to living in the heart of North London, the lettering read. This was an invitation not aimed towards people already living in Tottenham. Yeah, I get that. But it was appealing to newcomers, perhaps first-time buyers desperate to get on the property ladder with the help from the bank of mum and dad, or maybe buy-to-let landlords whose sole aim was to make money out of London's housing crisis. I would say the aim is to make money not just out of London's housing crisis, but to make money from tenants' labour. Yeah, disabled people are seen as the millstone around the neck of empire. Yep. The word urban was coded, a term that implied inner cities, poverty, and dilapidation. Urban is often used in music, particularly, code language for black people live here. The 2011 census saw 65% of Haringey? I can't say it. Oh,
Haringey.
I want to live in a place with gay in the name.
I lived there for a few years. It's not as nice as you think it is. It's not happy in rainbows. It's misery and poverty.
Damn it! Let's go make it gay.
It's the first tube stop on the blue line. Can't remember which. It's been too long. Before you go into Zone 3, so it's the outer rim of London, and it's the one where most people can start just about afford to rent.
So you're saying that something with gay in the name is on the rim?
Yes.
I'm gonna stop now.
I'm going back on mute.
They do zones instead of boroughs. Yes. In London, it's zones. The 2011 census saw 65% of Haringey residents report that they were not white British. I was suspicious of the sudden increase in Tottenham new builds, worried that they might begin to usher in an era of gentrification, with huge implications for the class and racial makeup of my area. My suspicions were not unfounded. In 2013, The Economist reported that in neighbouring London borough, the Hackney, between the years 2001 and 2011, Stoke Newington's white British population jumped by 15% and Dalston's by 26%. Fueled by gentrification, the change wasn't just about race but wealth, affluence and mobility. It was also about class. After noticing the first quote-unquote urban living invitation, I saw similar new build construction sites popping up all over Tottenham. In 2015, barriers around the freshly built Rivers apartments on the Spurs end of Tottenham High Road promised passers-by a major sport-led development for Tottenham. New homes, new school, new jobs. Fascinated by the race and class implication of London's housing boom, I decided to look into it and began rifling through the council's publicly available documents. The same year, Haringey Council planned to build 1,900 homes in Tottenham by 2018. This was promised to be part of a £131 million regeneration programme, with funding secured from the city's most senior administrative body, the Greater London Authority. On the face of it, it seemed like a positive contribution to meeting a high level of demand for housing in the borough of Haringey. In mid-2015, its housing waitlist had over 4,500 people looking for somewhere to live. The council decided that half the homes built would be affordable, 2/3 of which would be affordable rent, 1/3 would be shared ownership, and as a response to the housing crisis, it could not have been more timely. But when I looked deeper into the borough's regeneration plans, I found a very different picture. An intriguing coalition of people had aligned to question exactly who the new housing in Tottenham would benefit, and they made convincing claims about race, class, wealth, and access. One activist told me, "We are not opposed to regeneration. This is a community and an area that needs it, and investment for existing residents." His view was echoed by another housing activist who said, "People would like to see improvements, but what kind of improvements, and for whom?" The question was whether low-income local residents in most need, who are mostly black, would benefit from the new housing at all. The crux of criticism against Haringey's housing plans surrounded the council's decision to place a high priority on affordable home ownership. The council's own Equality Impact Assessment, or EQIA, of its housing strategy read, "There is a possibility that over time black residents in Haringey may not benefit from the plans to build more homes through promoting affordable home ownership in East Haringey. White households benefit more easily. The 250 homes available at affordable social rent that Haringey planned to build by the year 2018 accounted for just 5% of the number of people wanting to be homed." It was damning, but at the time, Haringey Council agreed and argued that they needed to sell homes privately because funding available from central government just wasn't enough for the whole project. To truly understand what happened here, you need to think about these housing plans in the context of Tottenham's history of race and class. In 2015, the average Haringey resident earned around £24,000 a year. That figure is above the national average of £22,044, but below inner London average salaries of about £34,473. However, Haringey's average earnings were skewed by the vast income inequalities in the borough itself. Yes, essentially. The council calls this the East and West Divide. In East Haringey's Tottenham Hale, where new housing was proposed, the highest amount of residents work in jobs like sales and service, cleaning, delivering goods, collecting bins. That's in comparison to 23.9% of Haringey's overall residents working in professional occupation. This is a clear class divide. Home ownership is high in the affluent west of the borough, like in Muswell Hill, Crouch End, and Highgate, while residents in the east of the borough, like Seven Sisters, White Hart Lane, and Tottenham Hale, live mostly in social housing. I recognize these names because of football. I read something very interesting. So I was asking a friend of mine years ago, why is it that majority of our black friends in London support Tottenham as a football club? And he said that not only are a lot of the players black, but it's largely a black area, and it's seen as London's working class football club. I don't know how true that is, because same as Liverpool. But anyway, I can talk about football a lot. Don't get me started. Similarly, high salaries could be found in West Haringey while low pay is found in the East. These fault lines are compounded by race, with white people disproportionately represented in the West and black people disproportionately represented in the East. In West, wards of Muswell Hill, Crouch End and Highgate, more than 80% of residents are white, in comparison to around 40% of residents in East towards Northumberland Park and Tottenham Hale. A report from the Runnymede Trust at Manchester University declared Haringey one of the most unequal places in England and Wales. And according to the Council's Inequalities Impact Assessment on its own housing strategy, single mothers in the borough are most likely to be houseless in 2015, and was increasing. It was fair to conclude that it was women, almost certainly the majority black, almost certainly mothers who were being pushed into precarious living situations. Their council responded by ignoring their needs and in its housing plans. In March of 2015, dissent at the council's regeneration plan spilled over into local government. The General Committee of Tottenham Constituency Labour, an organisation of the local party members, unanimously passed an emergency resolution noting its concern that the housing plans had placed the onus on black residents to increase their income to be able to afford new homes on offer and not be required or considered what the council should be doing to enable equality of opportunity, including eliminating discrimination. Of course, because the racism is systemic. They don't know it. They don't notice it. The resolution wasn't the policy of Tottenham CLP councillors, but it did have an effective way of displaying the general feeling of discontent. When I pressed Haringey Council for explanations on the racially exclusive nature of the housing plans, Alan Strickland, Haringey Council's cabinet member for housing and regeneration, told me, where people are struggling to access different types of homes because of their incomes, clearly what has to be done is address their incomes. That must come through skills and jobs and training and employment. So American. Through our economic development and jobs work, we want to make absolutely sure that we are improving life chances so that everybody can access new homes. It seemed like an unrealistic, ambitious cop-out in the context of systemic racial economic disadvantage. If we are yet to solve the problem nationally, how on earth was one council going to achieve it? But they've pressed on with the plans. In mid-2016, a source close to Haringey Council told me they had no intention to make a U-turn despite the solid evidence that the plans could lead to black racial displacement. This is just one part of the city, but it's clear how in Britain race and class are intertwined. In this case, building housing out of reach for working class people meant that it was out of reach for black people. Exactly. Education just doesn't you graduate and suddenly you're not going to walk into a job. When you graduate, chances are you're going to sit and twiddle your thumbs for months, maybe even years. I lived there during the riots that happened when the police killed a black teenager. The opportunity folks took over the vigil. Oh, was that Stephen Lawrence? No, that was a group. That was a gang.
It was a bit later. Stephen Lawrence was much earlier, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
But we just moved into our flat, my ex and I had a phone call from his mother saying, "Are you all right? There's riots going on near you, and there's a building that's on fire on the news that looks just like the building you're in, and we've been trying to get hold of my ex, and we can't because he was at work." And yeah, eventually, because I was so freaked out, I went with the dog to stay with a friend. I think I stayed there about a week until things had fully died down, because they went on for days. It was intense.
And the police still refuse to acknowledge the bias and inherent racism in their policing.
Oh yeah. Well, they don't do anything about misogyny either. There was some text messages or WhatsApp messages that leaked from a Met Police chat.
Oh yes.
Yeah, some of those are just full of racism and sexism, and they found out that some of the men had been taking pictures of women that had been detained, and it was just, if we can't even get somebody to do something about that, to perhaps not, assault people they've arrested.
At this point, Moss, I think it's red, blue, and white. Those colors in the flag, it's just like we should just stop all countries with red, blue, and white in them from ever ruling anything, including France.
I agree.
They're all red, blue pilled, and white supremacists. Most countries is purple. I'm gonna go pee. I'll be back. Welcome back. That's better. Okay. You know, I know it's a short reading today, but I'm tired. But I'm gonna finish this chapter and then I'm gonna go to bed. We should be rethinking the image we conjure up when we think of a working class person. Instead of a white man in a flat cap, it's black woman pushing a pram. It's worth questioning exactly who wins from the suggestion that only working class people are worth our compassion, are white, or black and ethnic minority people are hoarding scant resources at the expense of the white working class. A seemingly innocuous phrase that has become naturalized in British politics over the past decade, the white working class, is supposed to describe a group of disadvantaged and underrepresented people in Britain. When she threw her hat in the ring for the 2015 Labour Party leadership contest, Leicester West's MP, Liz Kendall, explicitly let it be known that she was interested in supporting white working class children. Setting out her stall for the leadership bid, meeting with journalists, she said she wanted Labour to be doing the best for kids, particularly in white working class communities. This wasn't just class discrimination that was holding these kids back, she seemed to suggest. It was their whiteness. When the BBC announced plans to increase the representation of people of colour in their ranks in an attempt to tackle overrepresentation of whiteness on and off screen, Conservative politician Philip Davies took great umbrage with the decision. He was so outraged that he opted to take on Tony Hall, the BBC's Director General. Confronting Hall in the House of Commons Culture, Media, Sport Selection Committee, Davies said, "If I have a white working class constituent who wants that opportunity, why should they be deprived because you set these politically correct targets?" fucking, as if centuries of colonization, apartheid, redlining, all of those things, racial segregation laws, slavery, wasn't an unfair leg up to white people. They think that that history of that leg up is so naturalized and normalized that they think that it's merit. They automatically think that the white person is more qualified. They automatically think that the white person is more capable. White supremacy is a handout. Just putting that out there. White supremacy is a handout. Again, the implication was that race and class are two separate disadvantages that are in direct competition with each other. The phrase white working class plays into the rhetoric of the far right. Affixing the word white to the phrase working class suggests that these people face structural disadvantage because they are white, rather than because they are working class. These are newly regurgitated old fears of white victimhood that suggest that the real recipients of racism... Ugh, come on, puzzle piece. Sorry, I have to do the puzzle piece thing on TikTok. These are newly regurgitated old fears of white victimhood that suggest that the real recipients of racism are white people, and that this reverse racism happens because of the unfair special treatment that black and brown people receive. When Philip Davies intervened against the positive action at the BBC, he interpreted the work as an attack on white and working class constituents rather than a challenge to the BBC's white and middle class managers and executives. And so we find ourselves focusing on an imaginary reverse racism rather than the legitimate class prejudice that exists, because they don't want the class prejudice to stop. It's extraordinary to see how Nick Griffin's rhetoric about an embattled white working class has been subsumed into the mainstream less than a decade since his political peak. The class privilege of middle and upper class people in Britain is not challenged when we focus on the plight of the white working classes. Instead, shifts the focus of the problem to the black and brown people. The immigrants. That is scarcity mentality. There are many people who feel that the pace of change in their communities has been too fast, and the government has not properly resourced those particular areas to respond to that change, said Baroness Saida Warsi in a 2009 episode of BBC's Question Time. At the time, she was Conservative Shadow Minister for Community Cohesion and Social Action. Demonize the most vulnerable. Absolutely. Most 100%. This is not a race debate, she continued. This is a debate about resources. Although the Baroness somewhat optimistically sought to change the terms of the debate, the resentment has never stopped been targeted at immigrants. This feeling of scarcity has been fueled by government policy, like the right to buy, which gave council tenants an option to buy the property they were living in with discounts in the 80s, reducing the amount of Britain's social housing stock. Even now, councils are struggling to replace property sold. Information tracking sales between 2015 and 16 showed that for the 12,246 council homes sold to tenants in England under right to buy, just 2,055 replacements began being built. This is a consequence of government direction, not grasping immigrants hoarding housing. The answer to ending British people living in poverty and precarious housing will not be found in ending immigration. There is no evidence to suggest that my kind will all go back to where we came from. Life would get any better and or easier for poor white people. Screw bank ownership, yep. The same systems and practices that led to the class hierarchy would still stand. Just a note. Class systems existed in Britain long before the 1400s. We must ask why politicians only ever approach class and poverty issues when it's in relation to whiteness. When race isn't mentioned, working class people aren't considered. They aren't considered deserving of targeted policies. In fact, before all of this white working class talk, class was a political taboo. When Margaret Thatcher said in 1987 that there was no such thing as society, she solidified a national feeling that it was individual ambition alone that would allow a person to get on in life. So American. Early serfdom? Yeah. Although we as a country are obsessed with class, we all delude ourselves for a long time that it doesn't matter at all. But now I worry that we've too eagerly accepted the far right's agenda of decent, hard-working white British people being besieged by immigrants. A 2014 report from market research company Ipsos Mori found that British people thought foreign-born populations of the country was 31% as opposed to the actual number of 13%. The same report found that the higher your income, the more likely you are to think that immigrants are a drain on public services. Things have switched from berating working class people for daring to exist to extending a helping hand to them as long as it's opposition to grasping ethnic minorities. Sticking white in front of the phrase working class is used to make assumptions about race, work, and poverty that compounds the currency-like power of whiteness. And I like it that she says the currency-like power of whiteness, because whiteness is currency. When it comes to talking about race, diversity, or even the faintest liberally minded hint of inclusion, self-interested white middle-class people seem to find a renewed interest in the advancement of their white working-class counterparts. In the hands of the have-it-alls, the class and race of the have-nots are pitted against each other. This myth of grabby immigrants angling themselves to snatch opportunities from white working-class people couldn't be further from the truth. A report from The Economist, combing through the data from the Office of National Statistics, found that some of the richest in Britain benefit from services like public transport and the NHS at a significantly higher rate than their poorer counterparts. I wonder why. Proving that those with wealth already do a very good job of hogging resources. The myth of grabby immigrants does, however, work to serve a particular agenda. These are the interests of those who are invested in preserving the current order of things. And I think I shall stop there for today. Any questions? Yes, I did not finish the chapter. I'm starting to skip over words in my brain, so I'd rather not continue reading badly. Why white be like that? That is the $64,000 question. Why white people be like that? Okay, well, if that is the only question, we can continue on the server while I get ready for bed. Because I'm going to hopefully get some good sleep and then get up in time for D&D. Because, I have D&D at 4 in the morning because I play with people on the West Coast.
Sounds like a fun time, to be honest.
Oh, all right. Well, I shall see y'all um, either later or wherever, you know. Liz Kendall, aka Eugenics Liz. Yep. What? Okay, we'll talk on the server. Drink water, take your meds, eat something, and smash the motherfucking patriarchy. Eat all the white men, and remember to be kind to yourselves because everybody deserves kindness, including you. Thank you for hanging out with me. I just still do have the $90 goal and my pay links in my link tree, so I do these readings for free. I do all of this labor for free. So please think about supporting me in any which way you can. Because, yeah, it'll really go a long way. And look what my husband got me for my birthday. He got me a smartwatch because we had vouchers from our medical insurance, and they were like, we're focusing on preventative stuff, and like healthy living and all of that stuff. So we're giving you vouchers, and we paid 250 rand for it, which is less than 20 no, about $20 for a Garmin smartwatch. So yeah, yay for having medical insurance. Anyway, ciao. I'm gonna stay on Discord. Where's the stuff? There you go.